anything. I can do anything through him who gives me strength. Because I can think about some things that I wouldn't want to do because they're scary. And what we're going to be talking about today is I'm going to be taking you on a hike that probably very few of you would want to do. And you'll understand that as you see my pictures that we'll be showing you today. But it was amazing. It was amazingly hard, but I survived it, and it was wonderful. I grew up in Los Angeles in a little town called Downey, and it was a suburb of Los Angeles. And my parents got me out of the city as much as they could, almost every Sabbath. There were places where we could go, and we could experience a little piece of nature in the big city. And I was blessed by having the parents that I had. And it's when I was probably about 10 years old that they said we needed to start backpacking. So backpacking involves putting everything that you need for an extended period of time on your back and then taking off into the wilderness. Our very first backpacking trip, we went to the Grand Canyon in June. Can you see a problem with that? And we hiked down to what is called the Havasu Indian Reservation, which is in the western end of the Grand Canyon. It's an absolutely beautiful place, but it's a 10-mile hike. And in the bottom of the Grand Canyon, it's even hotter than it is up on the rim. So this is my very first backpacking trip, and both my brother and I got heat exhaustion. And that is not a pleasant thing to get when you haven't drank enough water and you're putting out that much energy in the heat. We both survived, but we both spent more of our time just laying around, sleeping, and getting in the water to cool down, and it wasn't a very good experience. But fortunately, I didn't come back and do what some people I know have done, put for sale signs on all their backpacking equipment and say, I'm never doing this again. And backpacking has become something that I have just loved over the years, and it's been a wonderful experience for me. Heather and I and our kids did some backpacking for a while, and my son called me a few weeks ago and said, Dad, I want to go backpacking, and he's coming over in 2 weeks, and we're gonna, well, actually, sooner than that. He's coming over, and we're gonna hike out to the Washington coast again, Sandpoint, Cape Alava, and we're gonna spend a few days backpacking together out there. Backpacking has changed a lot since I first started backpacking. Most of my backpacking was done in the high Sierras when I was growing up. We had these little Primus stoves, they called them, which is a tiny little stove that you would pour some gas. You had to carry white gas. You'd pour some gas around the little thing that came up where the flame came out, and you'd kind of heat it, prime it, and then you'd pump it up. As it got warm, you'd turn the lever, put a match to it, and light it. Nowadays, we have what we call a jet boil, which is everything is self-contained. So you pull this off the bottom, and it's never easy to come off, but you pull that off the bottom, you open it up, and here's the flame piece. Here's the stand for it, and here's the gas canister. So you put all those together, and then this fancy thing has baffles, and you set it on the flame, and in less than 2 minutes, you've got boiling water. So some of the backpacking meals that we used to prepare would take a while, but you can get your food ready really quick. Another thing that's required up here in Washington in the Olympics or the Cascades is bear canister. So you have to fit all your food in this bear canister. And so I got a little bit of leftover food in there still. It almost takes a rocket scientist to get it open because you've got to press this just right and turn it. But you just set this out away from your camp, and if a bear does smell the food, theoretically they just will bat it around, but they can't bite it or get into it. So that's something that they make you carry nowadays. And you can have some creature comforts when you get into camp. I found these years ago at REI. These are just little tennis shoes, so you don't have to wear your boots. You just zip it, open it, and there's a lightweight shoe that you can wear around the camp. One of the things that's really changed, I just bought a new water filter. So you have a water bottle. Of course, boots are an important commodity too to support your feet. This is the purifying piece. And what you do is this opens up. You can scoop it in the crate, fill it up, and then you screw this on this end. And then it's kind of like milking a cow. You squeeze the water out, and it comes out this end into your cooking pot or your water bottle. And that's all there is to it. My other water filter that I used to use, you had to pump, and you're pumping and trying to keep the little thing in the creek that the water comes up into, but I kind of like that. That's one of my new backpacking things.
Greg, does gravity work at all, or must you squeeze?
It drips out slowly because you have to squeeze to get it to pass through. There's several filters in that system there. And of course, backpacks are high tech. I have my old Camp Trails backpack, but these are internal frame backpacks instead of the old external frames. And my problem is you can fit a lot in here. And I tend to fill it up because I want to be comfortable when I'm out there. Some of the things like your sleeping bag and your tent, you can strap on the outside. The two guys I was with, they had their sleeping bags inside, but I couldn't fit that. One of the things that I never had when I was growing up, they have these trekking poles now. So you can collapse them or you extend them out. And these were really handy on our hike. I have two of them because they give you two other points of balance, okay? And sometimes when you've got, my pack weighed 40 pounds when I left. So when you're carrying a 40-pound pack and you're climbing up ropes, up cliffs and things like that, you can't use these. But when you're walking on the beach at low tide, this gives you an extra point of balance so you don't slip on the rocks. Hats are another important thing that it's good to have with you. So when I left, my pack was 40 pounds. When I got home, my pack was 40 pounds. Do you see a problem with that? I'm a collector, so you can come up afterwards, and there's just some of the rocks and shells and bottle caps off Japanese bottles and things like that that I pick up just because it's fun to pick them up. And then I picked up this wonderful little heart-shaped rock as a gift to my wife when I got home because she likes heart-shaped things, so I brought that back from my beach adventure. But one of the things that I want to propose today is that you have to be prepared when you go out on a hike like I went on. I knew where we were going. Let's go ahead and get the PowerPoint up here, Mike. I knew that we were going to be hiking from a place called Oil City up to Third Beach, which is just outside of La Push. It's a 17-mile hike. You think, well, that's not very far. But if you consider the fact that there's a whole lot of up and down that we did, sometimes fairly high, it was an intense hike. But none of the three of us that went, my friend Lee and my friend Dave, none of us were prepared for what we got into on this hike. We didn't know it was coming. You know, we had everything we needed to do to survive it, but being prepared can have varying degrees of importance. On this one, we'll get into several things. What you see happening in this picture here, when you're hiking on the coast, you really have to work with the tides. And the tide wasn't out quite as far as we needed it to be, so that's Lee and Dave running around a rock in order to not get their feet wet as the tide was coming in. So being prepared for the hike, we had to have everything that we needed, but we also needed to be mentally prepared for what we would get into. So we needed to have all these things that I just showed you. And I want to propose that in the Christian walk, there's some preparation that we need to be doing also. And John 14, 1-3 is a text that kind of reminds us of some of those things. Could probably, most of us, just say it from memory. Do not let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God. Trust also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, I would have told you. I am going to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, that you also may be where I am. So there's some preparation going on there in heaven. God has a home for us. What do we have to do to get the key to that home? We have to believe. We have to trust Jesus, that he has forgiven us for the times we blow it. And we have a ticket. Someday we're going to get to heaven. And we're going to find a beautiful place prepared for us there. One of the things in life or in backpacking that we have to do is plan our route. We have to study what's ahead. So our hike was going to be on 17 miles. This is the list of things we're talking about now. 17 miles of some of the most rugged coast. I spent 3 days with almost zero internet. And I realized on Wednesday, when we'd finally gotten to Third Beach, that I hadn't missed checking my email. It was kind of wonderful. But we had to plan the route, so we knew where we were going. We knew there was going to be some impassable heads. That means the cliff comes down and the water's there, and even at low tide, there's no way to walk around. And that's why you've got to get up and over and down the other side. So very, extremely rugged coastline. In life, we have some rugged things that we have to get over as well. And there's a couple of texts that I really like as we're talking about planning our route. Jeremiah 29:11 is one of them. It says, "For I know the plans that I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you a hope and a future." So we have planning we have to do while we're here on this earth, but God also has a plan. And he has a path for us to be on. And then Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not unto your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your path. So as you journey through life here on this earth, when you're planning your route, remember to keep God as a part of that. Next, we have to be aware of dangers in our lives. We don't want to be paranoid, but we need to be aware of the dangers. The tides are one of the critical things when you're hiking on the Washington coast. The overland trails can be very tricky. There are steep cliffs that you have to go up and then you have to come down the other side. And there are river crossings. We were pleased that the rivers were down because what's happening up in the high Olympics right now, it's warm and the snow is melting going into the rivers. And we were having visions. In fact, some of the literature we read said this one creek crossing on Mosquito Creek, you're going to be waist deep. And that's tricky because if you fall with your backpack on, that's not a good thing to think about. Fortunately for us, the river crossings, the deepest was about knee deep. We had 3 to do, and the last one was only about ankle deep. But these can be dangerous. And in life, we have to be aware of dangers too. So in 1 Peter 5:8, I'm just going to say that one instead of looking it up. Satan is going around like a roaring lion, seeking who he can devour. Okay, there's dangers out there. He's throwing temptations at us all the time because he wants to catch us off guard. So that's a danger in life that we have to be aware of. But then we have Ephesians 6, verses 10 through 18 as a reminder of what we do during those times when Satan is throwing darts at us and trying to get us. So Ephesians 6, beginning in verse 10. Finally, be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Therefore, put on the full armor of God so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground. And after you've done everything to stand, stand firm then with the belt of truth buckled around your waist, with the breastplate of righteousness in place, with your feet fitted with the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. In addition to all this, take up the shield of faith with which you can extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil one. Take on the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God, and pray in the Spirit on all occasions with all kinds of prayers and requests. With this in mind, be alert and always keep on praying for the saints. So you look at my equipment here, and a lot of the equipment I had is mentioned, at least protecting the parts that we just read about in Ephesians there. And then there's the need to trust. One of the biggest things that we had to trust was the old ladders and ropes that we were climbing as we were out there in the wilderness. Proverbs 3, 5, and 6 reminds us, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Remember that one that we've already looked at today. Another important thing you have to do when you're backpacking and in life is to watch out for each other. We have to be patient. We have to be careful. We have to reach out and help each other sometimes. And there's a text in Hebrews 10, verse 25. And I will find it here in a minute. Hebrews 10. It says, "Let us not give up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but let us encourage one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching." There were times in this hike that we really had to encourage each other to keep going. Lee is 71. He's in really good shape for being 71, but he's got some health issues. So we have to keep an eye on each other, and that's what we need to do in our Christian walk as well. Watch out for each other. An important thing that we have to do, too many of us in life are on a mission to accomplish something. But when you're out there in the beauty that I was just in, it's easy to stop and take the time to enjoy nature. Tide pools are full of life, and I enjoy just sitting down next to a tide pool and just watching for things to move in there. The sea stacks, the ocean waves, the eagles. There's so much in nature that we can enjoy. And we need to remember that in our Christian walk too, that we need to take the time to enjoy the beauty that God has made. So I'm going to read Proverbs 6, verse 6. "Go to the ant, you sluggard, consider its ways, and be wise." When's the last time you took the time to watch an ant mound? Probably none of us do that too much, but to observe nature in that way. And then Luke 12:22-31, I'm not going to read that whole thing, but that's the one that I need because it starts off, "Don't worry." And I'm a worrier. And then the writer of that tells us to look at the birds because they don't worry, but they're taken care of, and everything is good with them. And then he refers us to the lily. Consider the lily. So there's encouragement there for us to stop in our busy rush of life and enjoy the things of nature. And then the final one is don't give up. Perseverance. We had rough trails, we had heavy packs. Our first campsite was beautiful. I'll show you in a minute. Second campsite, we didn't realize there was only one campsite at this beach, and it was like room for one tent, and there were three of us with three tents. We worked it out. So don't give up. Philippians 3, back to close to the other one that we already read. Philippians 3, we'll find it here. 13 and 14, 12, 13 and 14. "Not that I have already obtained all this, or have already been made perfect, but I press on to take hold of that for which Jesus Christ took hold of me. Brothers and sisters, I do not consider myself yet to have taken hold of it, but one thing I do, forgetting what is behind and straining toward what is ahead, I press on toward the goal to win the prize for which God has called me heavenward in Christ Jesus." So when it gets rough, don't give up. This was our first day. We knew we had a major boulder field that we had to get across. So you can see the size of the rocks there. And we actually got partway through it and came to a point where the waves were hitting the rocks and splashing up on us. And we sat down there just above the water line and ate our lunch. And then by the time we were done and ready to move on, it was more clear. But you can see the size of those rocks are pretty good, and it was rough getting across them. But then when you get across them, this is what you have: a beautiful sandy beach. And I loved the way you could see their footprints as they were walking ahead of me there. and just a beautiful place. Here's one of those sea stacks that's just starting to erode out, and it's amazing to look out in the water and see all the ones that are out there and just enjoy God's beautiful creation. Every once in a while you stop and take the pack off and get a drink of water and just sit and enjoy the beauty that's there. And then you see this. There's one of those ladders. I don't see, well, you can see it. Going right up the middle of the picture is an almost vertical ladder. And if you look at it carefully, you can see there's some big gaps in there where boards have rotted away. And I'm the tall guy of the three of us that were there. The other two are a bit shorter. And they had to really work to get over some things like this with the broken rungs. So we're climbing up this cliff. Here's a view from the top looking down to give you an idea how steep it is. And Lee is making his way up that ladder. For me on this one, it was hard because when you got to the top, the rope stopped. And it's a long way down. And the next rope was about 6 feet over here. So I'm holding it. I'm a little unsteady because of the weight of the backpack. And sometimes you just gotta do it, because if you stand there and work it up in your mind, you're just gonna get totally stressed out. So I just leaned in against the cliff and just worked my way over till I could grab that rope. And then I felt so much better. These overland trails are really interesting. So this one doesn't have a ladder. It just has the rope. And most of the ropes have knots that people have tied in them, and that's really nice when you have the knots, because then you can really hold on. One of the things I wasn't prepared for was the number of ropes, and I didn't have any gloves. So luckily Lee had an extra pair of gloves in his backpack so I could wear those. And they really helped when you're doing this climbing. This is an old growth forest. Some of the places, some logging had taken place. We could tell from the way they'd been cut, and there were some with the springboard cuts in them. One of the things I noticed that I'm under this tree and it's alive and growing. So many of these old trees started as on nurse logs. The nurse logs have long since rotted away. And so many of the trees had this space that you could crawl under, a place of shelter if you needed it. We had tents, but I thought that was pretty neat. And you can see a lot of that greenery in the foreground, especially the stuff not right in front of me, but over by the root. That's called sorrel, and it's edible. And it's a little bit like watercress. So the other two guys thought I was crazy, because as I was hiking along, it was all along the trail. I just reached down and grabbed one and eat it, and then get another one and eat it. And so I had some fresh food to eat along the way here. But here's the view when you get to the top and look down in the next bay. And you never know exactly what it's going to be like. This was our campsite that night. We had hiked 7 miles to get here, but it was a grueling 7 miles. And notice our 3 tents are very well spaced out. There was nobody else in the campsite. There was a brand new outhouse that they had built, and I didn't put a picture in, but if you left the door open, it had a really nice view. Very, very nice. This is looking south down the beach there. And the next morning was our first crossing. This crossing was really nice because it was sandy. So we didn't have to put water socks on. I didn't have water socks, so I had to walk barefoot on the next 2 crossings, which were on rocks. And a little bit painful by the time you got across. Luckily the water wasn't cold, but we made it. Notice that one sea stack has a window in it. It's amazing how the activity of the waves can wear holes in rocks like that. So this is where we stopped and ate our lunch. And this is me using my water filter there. So this was the first time I had used this particular kind of filter. I still don't know how I did it, but somehow I got sand in my water bottle. The other two guys were very amused with that and kept teasing me about it. I don't think it could go through the filter, so I'm assuming it was just on the outside and dropped down in the bottle. But by day 3, I had quite a collection in there, so I just couldn't shake it when I was drinking, but I could see it down there. Here's Lee going down one of the ropes, and Dave is a little bit further down there. Just so green, so beautiful, just a wonderful hike. This is Mosquito Creek, and that one was quite the crossing. It was quite wide, and you can see all the rocks in the bottom. By the time I got across it, my feet hurt. I was glad to be able to put my boots back on. And then you come out, after another overland, you come out on the beach. You see interesting things on the beach. This is a dead baleen whale. I think it was probably a gray. It was quite large, but definitely not full grown. And you see things like this that remind you wherever you are in life. There's bad things, there's good things. But someday there's going to be no more death and no more dying and no more sickness. And boy, do I long for that day. The next picture might be a little freaky for some people, but this is an otter skull. And if you look at his teeth, you'll see that they're pink. Otters eat mussel shells, and there's chemicals in mussel shells that oftentimes turn their teeth purple. I'd never seen one that had pink teeth, so I thought that was interesting. But kind of interesting. We saw otter tracks all over the place, but never once did we see a live otter. In fact, the next morning after I took this picture, I went out on that beach and crossed a little creek and just hiked a little bit. And while I was down there, 4 otters went down to the beach. And yeah, I was looking around, but they got there without me seeing them. But their footprints were all there when I got back. So this is what we called Camp Cozy, because all 3 of our tents are in that place that was made to be one tent. We had to move driftwood, we had to move rocks in order to squeeze in there. My tent's the front one on the left, and Lee's tent is next to mine, and Dave's is down at our feet because he snores. But we couldn't get very far away from him. We had thought about camping on the beach, but there was going to be a 9.1 foot high tide, and we didn't know how high that would come on that beach because it depends on the slope of the beach. And we didn't want to wake up at 11 o'clock at night with waves hitting our tents and have to scramble to get to higher ground. So we made it work. We squeezed in there. But this was the view from where we ate our dinners that night. And the sun peeked out. It was a little chilly, so you can see I even had my stocking hat on. And the trees are just going straight up above me there. I was trying to get a picture so you could see that perspective. And then this is early the next morning as I was just enjoying walking on the beach. The sea stacks were beautiful. There's a set of otter tracks in the sand. And there we are. This is as we were leaving our campsite that day. We have smiles on our faces. We're doing well. And then we come to this. It was pretty tricky to get down this one. There were several routes you could take, but it hadn't rained, fortunately, because the mud would make it really treacherous. But when it's dry, it's kind of gravelly, so it's slick. So you really have to hold on to the rope to be sure that you don't slip. And then our last stretch of beach before going on another large overland and then coming down to Third Beach. This was a real tricky climb up with the rope. These rocks, you had to stay back because rocks had come tumbling down. But this is what greeted us when we got to the top. Beautiful Indian paintbrush. And then this is the view of the beach we had just walked on from up there on the top of that rock we had to climb. We had heard a rumor that the Forest Service was putting in some new ladders and steps, and this was our first experience on one of the new steps, and boy, that was nice, just to be able to walk up. And then we walked on through the forest, and this is our view of Third Beach, the last beach we would hike on. I'm afraid of heights, so I'm standing by the top of the waterfall. Heather's been here to this one. And our kids would walk right out there to the edge and put their toes and look down, and Heather and I'd. But I didn't take a picture of the waterfall from the top, but I'll show you one from the bottom. So here's one of these ladder things. Both Dave and Lee are coming down. These are the new ones, so they're very nice compared to what we had. And some of them had a rope as well, but it's still a bit unnerving because here I am sitting at the top of the next one, and that's how steep it is. But there's no other way down. So then it got to this point where it really didn't need to be a ladder. So you're bending over and the weight of your pack is pushing you down, and it kind of made it hard, kind of like being a crab with a heavy load. But in this one you can see the waterfall right about in the middle of the picture as it's coming down and dropping into the ocean. And this is Third Beach, where Heather and I would take our kids quite often when they wanted to go on an adventure for a weekend over Sabbath. It's an easy 1 mile hike. If you haven't been to Third Beach, it's a beautiful one to go to, and it's fairly easy to get to. Then you have to climb up a trail, but they have a bench, so we had to sit on the bench and take a picture to prove that we were there and that we had made it. So if you look at this map, we started, I wish the little pointer thing was working, but it's not. Oil City Trailhead is right down here. You go on to the Hoh Indian Reservation. Then you go up to Jefferson Cove and then Hoh Head, and you've got 3.5 miles of overland trail up to Mosquito Creek. And then you keep on going. There's Toliac Point, Strawberry Point, Taylor Point, and you finally get to Third Beach. So that's the whole trail. And this shows it in a little different perspective on another map. But that's how far we went as we traveled. So what I want you to do today is remember the lessons. I didn't show you these pictures to make you feel bad that you can't do it. I showed you the pictures so you could see how beautiful it is, because a lot of you never will be able to do that. But you have to experience life. And so these are the lessons I want you to remember as we go through life. Be prepared. Plan your route. Be aware of dangers. Trust. Watch out for each other. Take time to enjoy the beauty, and don't give up. Perseverance. Okay? time is short. We're not going to have much time left. There's going to come a day when we're going to have to flee to the wilderness, and we're not going to have time to pack our backpacks. But think about being fed by ravens, as we're told happened in the Bible. Think about oil jars and flour jars that never emptied. God's going to take care of us in those last days. So I want you to be ready, and I can't wait till Jesus comes again. That great reunion that we're going to have. I have a feeling it's going to be soon. So let's work together to persevere so that we'll be ready when that day comes. I don't think I have another slide. Nope, I should have put a nice picture there, but I will grab my guitar and we're going to sing, "Draw Me Nearer, Nearer, Precious Lord." One of the things that I just enjoyed over that course of that hike is I got a good opportunity to witness to these two guys that I was with. And they asked me questions. And I was able to answer those questions about what I believe is the Seventh-day Adventist Christian. So it was really neat. But being out in nature, I really felt drawn nearer to Jesus. So that's what I want you guys to feel today too. So join me as we sing. I am thine, O Lord, I have heard thy voice, and it told thy love to me. But I long to rise in the arms of faith, and be closer drawn to thee. Draw me nearer, nearer, blessed Lord, to the cross where thou hast died. Draw me nearer, nearer, blessed Lord, to thy precious bleeding side. Consecrate me now to thy service, Lord, by the power of grace divine. May my soul look up with a steadfast hope, and my will be lost in thine. Draw me nearer, nearer, blessed Lord, to the cross where thou hast died. Draw me nearer, nearer, blessed Lord, to thy precious bleeding side. Oh, the pure delight of a single hour that I spent before thy throne I spend. When I kneel in prayer and with thee, my God, I commune as friend with friend. Draw me nearer, nearer, blessed Lord, to the cross where thou hast died. Draw me nearer, nearer, blessed Lord, to thy precious bleeding side. Pray with me. Father, what a blessing it is, as we talked about in Sabbath school, to be able to worship you on the Sabbath day. Thank you for the wonderful things that you have made in creation for us to enjoy. Sin has marred what's here. We look forward to getting a taste of that beautiful new world as we're able to watch you recreate the world after sin is destroyed and sin and sinners will be no more. Father, we long for that day. We long to be with you. In the meantime, help us on our journey to keep our trust in you, to keep our faith up, and to keep our hand in yours as the guide who will help us to make it through. Thank you for your blessings in your name.